The sound of battle slowly faded. The forest became quiet again, but the silence was heavy and painful. Aragorn stood still for a moment, breathing hard. Around him lay the bodies of fallen orcs. Broken arrows were scattered on the ground. The smell of smoke and blood filled the air. Then he saw Boromir. Boromir was sitting against a tree, his body leaning forward. His shield was broken. His sword lay beside him. 3 arrows were stuck in his chest. His armor was damaged, but his face was calm. Aragorn ran to him and dropped to his knees. Boromir looked up slowly. His eyes were weak, but still clear. He tried to speak, but at first no sound came out. Aragorn held him carefully, supporting his back. "I tried," Boromir said quietly. His voice was shaking. "I tried to save them." Aragorn told him to rest, but Boromir shook his head. He knew his time was almost over. He took a slow breath and continued speaking. "They took the little ones," he said, "Merry and Pippin. Orcs, many of them. I fought, but I could not protect them." Aragorn looked down, his face full of sorrow, but he did not blame Boromir. He knew how fiercely Boromir had fought. Then Boromir's voice changed. It became softer, more painful. "I failed you," Boromir said. "I tried to take the ring from Frodo." For a moment, Aragorn said nothing. The wind moved gently through the trees. Leaves fell slowly to the ground. Boromir continued, his eyes filled with regret. "I wanted to save my people. I thought the ring could help Gondor, but I was wrong. The ring, it took hold of my mind." Aragorn placed his hand on Boromir's shoulder. "You fought bravely," Aragorn said. "You defended Merry and Pippin until the end. You have kept your honor." Boromir looked relieved. A faint smile appeared on his lips. "Aragorn," he whispered, "my brother, my captain, my king." Aragorn leaned closer. "Be at peace. Minas Tirith will not fall this day." Boromir smiled one last time. His head slowly dropped to the side. His body became still. Boromir, son of Denethor, was dead. Aragorn closed Boromir's eyes gently. He remained there for a long moment, silent, feeling the weight of loss and responsibility pressing down on him. Soon, Legolas and Gimli arrived. Legolas stopped when he saw Boromir. His sharp eyes softened. Gimli lowered his head in respect. "He fought like a true warrior," Gimli said quietly. "Yes," Aragorn replied. "He died defending others." There was no time for long grief. Aragorn stood up and looked around carefully. The ground was torn up. Footprints were everywhere. Orc tracks led east, deep into the forest. "They took the hobbits alive," Aragorn said. "There is still hope." But another thought cut deep into his mind. Frodo. Aragorn turned quickly and scanned the forest. There was no sign of Frodo or Sam. No footprints leading toward the river, no sound, nothing. For a moment, fear filled his chest. Then he saw the broken boat near the shore. Aragorn walked to it slowly. He touched the water. It was still moving gently, carrying something far away. "Frodo chose his path," Aragorn said quietly. "The ring is beyond our reach now." He closed his eyes for a moment. 3 paths lay before him. Follow Frodo, chase the orcs, or stay and mourn Boromir. Only one choice could be made. Aragorn turned back to Legolas and Gimli. "We must follow the orcs," he said firmly. "Merry and Pippin are alive. They need us." Legolas nodded without hesitation. "My bow is yours," he said. Gimli tightened his grip on his axe. "And my axe," he added. Together, they prepared Boromir's body. They placed him in one of the boats, laying his weapons beside him. Aragorn arranged his hands carefully, as if he were sleeping. They pushed the boat into the river. The water carried Boromir away slowly, between the tall stone statues of ancient kings. Aragorn watched until the boat disappeared from sight. Then he turned. Without another word, the three hunters began to run. Their footsteps were fast and steady. Leaves and branches cracked under their feet. The forest swallowed them as they chased the trail of the orcs. Behind them, the fellowship was broken. Ahead of them, war was waiting. Darkness slowly returned to the forest. Merry opened his eyes, but everything around him was blurry. His head hurt badly. The ground beneath him was cold and hard. He tried to move his arms, but they would not move. His hands were tied. A sharp pain ran through his body as he tried to sit up. He heard rough voices shouting and laughing, strange voices, deep and ugly voices. Orcs. Merry turned his head slowly. Firelight danced between the trees. Shadows moved around him. Tall shapes with twisted faces and sharp teeth walked back and forth carrying weapons. Nearby, Pippin lay on the ground. His face was dirty and his lip was bleeding. His eyes were open, but he looked confused and scared. "Merry?" Pippin whispered weakly. "I'm here," Merry answered quietly. "Don't move." An orc noticed them talking and kicked the ground near their heads. "Quiet," an orc shouted. "Move, little rats." The ropes around Merry's wrists burned against his skin. His legs were tied too. He felt small and helpless, but his mind was racing. He remembered Boromir standing in front of them, fighting. He remembered arrows flying. He remembered falling to the ground. Boromir had tried to protect them. The thought made Merry's chest feel heavy. The orcs pulled the hobbits to their feet. The ropes were tight. Walking was painful and slow. "Move!" another orc yelled, pulling Pippin forward. The group began marching through the forest. The night air was cold. Branches scratched Merry's face as they were dragged between trees. The orcs moved fast and did not care if the hobbits fell. Every time Merry stumbled, an orc yanked the rope or hit him with the handle of a weapon. Pippin was breathing fast. He was frightened, but also angry. "We have to do something," he whispered. Merry nodded slightly. He looked around carefully. There were many orcs, too many to fight. Some were tall and strong. Others were smaller but faster. They argued loudly as they walked. "Isengard," one orc growled. "No," another snapped. "Mordor." They pushed each other, shouting and cursing. Merry listened closely. He did not understand everything, but one name stood out clearly. Saruman. Merry felt a chill. These orcs did not serve just one master. They were divided, dangerous, and angry. As the night passed, their feet grew sore and numb. They were not given food, not given water. The orcs did not stop. When the sun finally began to rise, the forest slowly changed. The trees grew thinner, the land became rougher. Pippin was exhausted. His legs shook. He tripped and fell hard onto the ground. An orc lifted his blade. "Enough," another orc shouted. "They must stay alive." The blade stopped just inches from Pippin's face. Merry's heart was pounding. He felt fear, but also determination. He leaned closer to Pippin as they were pulled back up. "Listen, if we get a chance, we run." Pippin nodded weakly. The march continued for hours. The sun climbed higher. The heat became unbearable. The ropes cut deeper into their skin. At one moment, the orcs stopped near a small hill. They argued again, louder this time. Some pulled the hobbits toward the east, others pushed them west. In the chaos, Pippin felt something small and hard in his pocket. The elven brooch. His eyes widened slightly. Slowly, carefully, he moved his bound hands. His fingers touched the leaf-shaped pin. When no one was watching, he let it fall. The brooch disappeared into the grass. Merry saw it happen. A small spark of hope lit inside him. Good, very good. Soon the march began again. Behind them, far away, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli were running. They did not know it yet, but a small silver leaf now marked the trail. As the sun began to fall, the land opened wide. Rolling plains stretched far into the distance. The air smelled different, stronger, wilder. Rohan. The orcs moved faster now, driven by fear. They knew this land was dangerous. Riders could appear at any moment. Pippin's legs could barely move. His vision blurred. He stumbled again. Merry leaned closer. "Stay awake," he said softly. "We're not done yet." The hobbits were tired, hurt, and afraid. But they were still alive. And hope, small and fragile, was still walking beside them. The march did not stop. Merry and Pippin were barely able to walk. Their feet were sore and swollen. Their mouths were dry. Every breath felt heavy. The orcs kept pushing them forward, shouting and arguing at the same time. The land around them was wide and open now. The trees were far behind. The sky felt too big, with no place to hide. Suddenly, one of the orcs stopped. He raised his head and sniffed the air. "Horses," he growled. At once, the mood of the group changed. The orcs became nervous. They looked around quickly. Some of them argued louder. "Riders of Rohan," one said. "They are close." Fear spread among them. The orcs knew these lands were watched. They knew they were being hunted. The leaders shouted orders. They pulled Merry and Pippin roughly and began running. The hobbits' feet dragged along the ground. Stones cut their skin. The ropes burned. Pippin cried out in pain, but no one listened. As night fell, the wind grew stronger. Clouds covered the stars. The orcs ran faster, desperate to escape. Then suddenly, a loud horn sounded in the distance. A deep, powerful sound. The orcs froze. Another horn answered, and another. The sound surrounded them. Merry's heart jumped. "Riders," he whispered. The orcs screamed in panic. They pushed the hobbits to the ground and formed a rough circle, raising their weapons. From the darkness, shadows moved fast. Horses thundered across the land. Men appeared, tall figures riding at full speed, carrying spears and swords. Their armor shone faintly in the moonlight. The riders of Rohan had arrived. The battle was short and brutal. Horses crashed into the orcs. Blades flashed. Shouts and screams filled the air. Orcs fell to the ground one by one. Merry and Pippin lay still, trying not to be seen. An orc fell near them, twitching. Another ran past and disappeared into the darkness. Then silence. Only the sound of the wind remained. The riders circled the area carefully. One of them dismounted and looked around, checking the ground. They fled into the forest. No survivors. The riders mounted their horses again and rode away, believing the orcs were all dead. But they were wrong. Merry opened his eyes slowly. The ropes were still around his wrists, but no orcs remained. The night was quiet again. "Pippin," he whispered. "I'm here," Pippin replied weakly. With great effort, they rubbed the ropes against sharp stones until they loosened. Their hands were free at last. They stood up slowly, their legs shaking. All around them lay fallen orcs, broken weapons, dark stains on the ground. "We need to leave, before more come." They stumbled forward away from the battlefield, toward a dark wall rising in the distance. Trees. A forest. Old, deep, and silent. As they reached the edge, the air changed. It felt heavier. The trees were tall and ancient, their branches twisting like arms. The light barely reached the ground. "This place feels alive," Pippin whispered. They stepped inside. At once, the forest seemed to close around them. The sounds of the open land vanished. Even the wind was quiet here. They walked deeper, leaning on each other until their legs could carry them no more. Finally, they collapsed near the roots of a massive tree. They slept. When Mary woke, the forest felt different. The light was dim and green. The trees seemed closer now, as if watching. Pippin stirred. "Mary," he said slowly, "do you feel that?" Mary nodded. The ground beneath them felt warm, not like earth, more like skin. Suddenly, the tree behind them moved. The ground shook. A deep, slow sound echoed through the forest. "Who are you?" Mary and Pippin screamed. The tree was not a tree. It rose up slowly, taller than any man. Its bark cracked and shifted. Two deep eyes opened, glowing softly like moss-covered stone. Arms like branches stretched outward, roots pulled free from the ground. "I am Treebade," the creature said slowly, "shepherd of the forest." The hobbits stood frozen, fear and wonder filling their faces. "We are hobbits," Mary said carefully. "We are lost." Treebade leaned closer, studying them with ancient eyes. He said. "Little ones, very small, but not evil." He straightened and looked around the forest. "There is anger in the world. The trees feel it." Mary and Pippin looked at each other. They had escaped the orcs, but they had entered something far older, something powerful. And the forest was listening. The march did not stop. Mary and Pippin were barely able to walk. Their feet were sore and swollen. Their mouths were dry. Every breath felt heavy. The orcs kept pushing them forward, shouting and arguing at the same time. The land around them was wide and open now. The trees were far behind. The sky felt too big, with no place to hide. Suddenly, one of the orcs stopped. He raised his head and sniffed the air. "Horses," he growled. At once, the mood of the group changed. The orcs became nervous. They looked around quickly. Some of them argued louder. "Riders of Rohan," one said. "They are close." Fear spread among them. The orcs knew these lands were watched. They knew they were being hunted. The leader shouted orders. They pulled Mary and Pippin roughly and began running. The hobbits' feet dragged along the ground. Stones cut their skin. The ropes burned. Pippin cried out in pain, but no one listened. As night fell, the wind grew stronger. Clouds covered the stars. The orcs ran faster, desperate to escape. Then suddenly, a loud horn sounded in the distance. A deep, powerful sound. The orcs froze. Another horn answered, and another. The sound surrounded them. Mary's heart jumped. "Riders," he whispered. The orcs screamed in panic. They pushed the hobbits to the ground and formed a rough circle, raising their weapons. From the darkness, shadows moved fast. Horses thundered across the land. Men appeared, tall figures riding at full speed, carrying spears and swords. Their armor shone faintly in the moonlight. The riders of Rohan had arrived. The battle was short and brutal. Horses crashed into the orcs, blades flashed, shouts and screams filled the air. Orcs fell to the ground one by one. Merry and Pippin lay still, trying not to be seen. An orc fell near them, twitching. Another ran past and disappeared into the darkness. Then silence. Only the sound of the wind remained. The riders circled the area carefully. One of them dismounted and looked around, checking the ground. They fled into the forest. No survivors. The riders mounted their horses again and rode away, believing the orcs were all dead. But they were wrong. Merry opened his eyes slowly. The ropes were still around his wrists, but no orcs remained. The night was quiet again. "Pippin," he whispered. "I'm here," Pippin replied, weakly. With great effort, they rubbed the ropes against sharp stones until they loosened. Their hands were free at last. They stood up slowly, their legs shaking. All around them lay fallen orcs, broken weapons, dark stains on the ground. "We need to leave," Merry said, "before more come." They stumbled forward, away from the battlefield, toward a dark wall rising in the distance. Trees. A forest, old, deep, and silent. As they reached the edge, the air changed. It felt heavier. The trees were tall and ancient, their branches twisting like arms. The light barely reached the ground. "This place feels alive," Pippin whispered. They stepped inside. At once, the forest seemed to close around them. The sounds of the open land vanished. Even the wind was quiet here. They walked deeper, leaning on each other until their legs could carry them no more. Finally, they collapsed near the roots of a massive tree. They slept. When Merry awoke, the forest felt different. The light was dim and green. The tree seemed closer now, as if watching. Pippin stirred. "Merry," he said slowly, "do you feel that?" Merry nodded. The ground beneath them felt warm, not like earth, more like skin. Suddenly, the tree behind them moved. The ground shook. A deep, slow sound echoed through the forest. "Who are you?" Merry and Pippin screamed. The tree was not a tree. It rose up slowly, taller than any man. Its bark cracked and shifted. Two deep eyes opened, glowing softly like moss-covered stone. Arms like branches stretched outward, roots pulled free from the ground. "I am Treebeard," the creature said slowly, "shepherd of the forest." The hobbits stood frozen, fear and wonder filling their faces. "We are hobbits," Merry said carefully. "We are lost." Treebeard leaned closer, studying them with ancient eyes. He said. "Little ones, very small, but not evil." He straightened and looked around the forest. "There is anger in the world. The trees feel it." Merry and Pippin looked at each other. They had escaped the orcs, but they had entered something far older, something powerful. And the forest was listening. Treebeard stood very still, like a mountain made of wood. Merry and Pippin felt tiny beside him. His eyes were deep and slow, as if they had seen thousands of years pass. Treebeard said, thinking. "Hobbits. I have not heard that word in a very long time." He bent down slightly, moving carefully so he would not frighten them. "You are not orcs," he said slowly. "You do not smell like them. You smell of grass and earth." Merry swallowed and nodded. "Yes, we are friends. We were taken by orcs." Treebeard's face hardened. His wooden brow lowered. "Orcs," he repeated. The word sounded heavy, angry. "A bad name. A bad people." He straightened and looked around the forest. The trees stood silent, tall and ancient. Their leaves barely moved. "This is Fangorn Forest," Treebeard said. "It is very old, older than your people, older than the hills." He took a slow step forward. The ground shook slightly. "Come," he said. "Walk with me. We will talk." Merry and Pippin followed carefully. Each step Treebeard took was slow but powerful. As they walked, the forest seemed to open paths for him. They passed trees with faces hidden in bark. Some looked peaceful. Others looked angry, twisted, and dark. Pippin felt uneasy. "Are the trees watching us?" he asked quietly. Treebeard paused. "Yes," he said. "Some of them are awake. Some are sleeping. Some are angry." They continued deeper into the forest. The air was cool and smelled of moss and rain. Time felt strange here, slower, thicker. Treebeard spoke as they walked. His words came slowly, with long pauses. "There was a time," he said, "when the world was greener, when forests covered the land, when we Ents were many." Merry listened carefully. "And now?" he asked. Treebeard sighed. The sound was like wind moving through branches. "Now we are fewer," he said. "The forests are cut down, burned, destroyed." His voice grew deeper. "And Saruman is to blame." At the name, both hobbits looked at each other. "We know that name," Pippin said. "He works with orcs." Treebeard stopped walking. "Saruman," he said again. This time, his voice was full of anger. "He was once wise. He spoke with fair words, but now he has a mind of metal and wheels." Treebeard's hands clenched. "He cuts down trees. He burns them. He feeds his fires." The forest around them creaked softly, as if listening. Merry felt something change. Treebeard's anger was not loud, but it was deep. They reached the wide clearing. In the center stood a hill, and on it a place like a natural hall made of roots and stone. "This is my home," Treebeard said. He sat down slowly, resting against the hill. Merry and Pippin sat near his feet. Treebeard poured water from a wooden bowl and offered it to them. "Drink," he said. "It is Ent draught." They drank carefully. The water was cool and fresh, with a strange, rich taste. At once, they felt stronger, taller, more awake. Pippin blinked. "I feel bigger," he said. Treebeard nodded. "Yes," he said. "It helps things grow." They stayed there for a long time. Treebeard spoke of the old days, of forests that once reached the mountains, of rivers that ran clear. But as he spoke, his voice grew darker. "The trees are calling," he said, finally. "They are afraid. They are angry." Merry stood up. "Treebeard," he said carefully, "Saruman is destroying the world. He will not stop." Treebeard closed his eyes. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he stood. "It is time," he said slowly. "Time for the Ents to decide." He lifted his head and let out a deep, powerful call. The sound echoed through the forest like thunder. From far away, answers came. Low sounds, slow voices. The Ents were waking. Treebeard led Merry and Pippin through the forest. Along the way, other Ents appeared. Tall, ancient, different shapes and sizes. Some walked, some leaned, some looked half asleep. They gathered in a wide valley. The Entmoot had begun. The Ents spoke slowly, very slowly. Their meeting lasted hours, then days. They debated, they remembered, they argued. Merry and Pippin listened, growing frustrated. "They talk too much and do nothing," Pippin whispered. Merry felt the same fear. Time was passing. Saruman was still strong. Finally, Treebeard stood again. "It is decided," he said. Merry's heart sank. "We will do nothing," Treebeard said. The hobbits followed him silently. Disappointment weighed heavily on them. But as they walked, Treebeard suddenly stopped. He looked towards the edge of the forest, towards Isengard. Smoke rose in the distance. Stumps, burned land, destroyed woods. Treebeard froze. A deep sound rose from his chest. Not a word, a roar. "Many of these trees were my friends," he said. His anger exploded. "To Isengard," Treebeard roared. The forest answered. The Ents moved. The ground shook as they marched. Trees pulled free from the earth. Roots cracked stone. Merry and Pippin ran to keep up. The War of the Trees had begun. The march to Isengard was slow, but unstoppable. Treebeard walked at the front. His long legs moved like pillars. With every step, the ground trembled. Behind him, the Ents followed, dozens of them, tall and ancient, their faces dark with anger. Merry and Pippin ran beside Treebeard, trying to keep up. They had never seen such power move so calmly. As they left Fangorn Forest, the land changed. The air grew thick with smoke. The smell of burning wood filled their noses. In the distance, Isengard rose from the plain. Tall black walls surrounded a deep pit. At the center stood the Tower of Orthanc, dark, smooth, and cold, like a blade pointing at the sky. Merry felt a chill. "That place feels wrong," he said. Treebeard did not answer. His eyes were fixed on the land ahead. Around Isengard, the forest was gone. Stumps filled the ground. The earth was torn open. Fires burned. Machines moved and hissed. Treebeard stopped. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke. "This was once a green place," he said. "Gardens, trees, life." His voice shook, not with weakness, but with rage. "They are gone." The Ents began to murmur. Deep, angry sounds rolled through the group. Treebeard raised his arms. "Break the dam," he said. The Ents moved at once. Some charged toward the outer walls. Others moved to the river that fed Isengard. Their hands dug into stone. Roots tore through earth. Inside Isengard, orcs shouted in alarm. "They are here!" one screamed. Horns blew. Gates closed. Arrows flew. But the arrows bounced harmlessly off the Ents' thick bark. An Ent reached the wall and pushed. Stone cracked. Another Ent tore metal from the ground like paper. Water began to roar as the dam broke. A great wave surged forward, flooding the outer ring of Isengard. Orcs ran in panic. Fires were drowned. Machines were crushed. Treebeard moved closer to Orthanc. He lifted a massive stone and threw it. It struck the tower. The sound echoed like thunder. Inside Orthanc, Saruman watched from above. His face was pale. His eyes burned with fear and fury. He shouted words of power, his voice strong and commanding. But the Ents did not listen. They were beyond words now. They were wrath. Merry and Pippin stood on a hill, watching the destruction. Water surged through the pits. Walls collapsed. Smoke rose and vanished. "This is unbelievable," Pippin whispered. An Ent passed near them carrying fire in his bark. He screamed in pain. The sight changed Treebeard. "No fire!" he roared. "Protect the Ents!" He rushed forward, tearing down walls to release more water. The flood grew stronger, washing fire away. The battle lasted through the night. By morning, Isengard was broken. The pit was filled with water. The walls lay in ruins. Only Orthanc still stood, untouched and silent. Saruman was trapped. Treebeard stood before the tower, breathing deeply. The ants gathered around him. "It is done," he said. Merry and Pippin approached. "What happens now?" Merry asked. Treebeard looked up at Orthanc. "Now," he said slowly, "we watch, we wait." High above, Saruman stared down from the tower. His power was not gone, but his world had fallen. Far from Fangorn Forest, under a wide and restless sky, another story was unfolding. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli ran across the plains of Rohan. They had not stopped for days. Their feet were sore, their bodies tired, but they did not slow down. The trail of the orcs was clear. Broken branches, deep footprints, dark blood on the grass. "They are heading north," Aragorn said, kneeling to study the ground, "toward Isengard." Legolas looked far ahead. His sharp eyes narrowed. "They are not alone anymore," he said. "Riders are near." Soon they heard the sound of hooves. From the hills came a group of horsemen, tall men wearing armor, carrying spears. Their leader rode forward, his face stern and watchful. "I am Eomer, son of Ealmund," he said. "Why do you run through the lands of Rohan with weapons drawn?" Aragorn stepped forward. "We hunt orcs," he said. "They took our friends." At the word orcs, Eomer's expression darkened. "We hunted them too," he said. "By night, near the forest, none survived." Aragorn's heart tightened. "What of the hobbits?" he asked. "Small folk, were they among them?" Eomer shook his head. "We saw no bodies of small ones," he said. "If they lived, they fled into Fangorn Forest." "Fangorn," Gimli groaned. "That forest is worse than orcs," he muttered. Eomer warned them not to enter, then turned his riders away. Aragorn watched them ride off, hope and fear mixing inside him. "They may still be alive," Aragorn said quietly. The three turned toward the forest. After long hours of walking, they felt a strange presence. The air was heavy. The trees loomed like silent watchers. Suddenly, an old man appeared before them. He stood leaning on a staff. His cloak was gray, his beard was white, his eyes shone with hidden light. Gimli raised his axe. "Wizard," he growled. The old man lifted his staff. There was a flash of white light. Legolas cried out and raised his bow. Aragorn stepped forward, heart racing. Then the old man laughed. "Lower your weapons," he said. "You do not know me?" The light faded. Before them stood Gandalf. Not gray, white. "Gandalf?" Aragorn whispered. "Yes," Gandalf said softly. "I am returned." Joy and disbelief filled them. Gandalf spoke of falling with the Balrog, of death, and of being sent back until his task was done. "There is no time," Gandalf said. "War is coming." Together they rode toward Edoras, the golden city of Rohan. High on a hill stood Meduseld, the hall of King Theoden. But inside, something was wrong. The king sat slumped on his throne. His hair was thin and gray. His eyes were dull. Beside him stood a pale man with dark eyes and a quiet smile. Grima Wormtongue. Gandalf stepped forward. "You are not powerless," Gandalf said to Theoden. "You have been poisoned by lies." Grima protested, but Gandalf raised his staff. Light filled the hall. Theoden cried out and rose from his throne. Strength returned to his limbs. His back straightened. His eyes burned with life again. Grima fled. Theoden stood tall once more. "I was weak, but I am awake." At once he called for action. Riders were summoned, armor was prepared, weapons were sharpened. But news came quickly. Saruman was marching. Thousands of orcs were moving toward Rohan. "They are too many," Theoden said. "We cannot defend the open fields." Gandalf spoke quietly. "Ride west to Helm's Deep." The people of Rohan began their journey. Women, children, and the old rode in long lines. Soldiers guarded them. Along the road, danger struck. Wargs, great wolf-like creatures, attacked. The battle was fierce. Aragorn fought bravely, but in the chaos, he fell from a cliff into the river below. Legolas and Gimli believed him dead. But Aragorn survived. He climbed from the river, wounded but alive, and followed the trail alone. At last, the people of Rohan reached Helm's Deep. A deep valley, high stone walls, an ancient fortress. But fear hung heavy in the air. They were few, and the enemy was coming. Torches appeared in the distance. Drums beat. The army of Saruman was near. The valley was quiet, but tension hung heavy in the air. Theoden rode along the walls of Helm's Deep. His face was stern, his eyes scanning the horizon. The fortress was ancient, built of stone and history. The deeping wall rose high, strong, but even stone could fall. Soldiers moved quickly, checking weapons and armor. Bowstrings were pulled tight. Spears were sharpened. Every man, woman, and boy in the fortress prepared for the coming storm. Legolas stood on a tower, his bow ready. Gimli checked the gates, his axe gleaming in the morning light. The sound of their breathing mixed with the wind, and for a moment, all was still. Then the drums began, a deep, rolling sound. At first, it was distant. Then it grew louder. Shadows moved across the hills. Orcs poured forward, thousands of them. They had ladders, towers, and battering rams. Their cries echoed across the valley. The horn of Helm's Deep blew, long and powerful. Every defender raised their weapons. Every heart beat faster. Aragorn arrived just as the first wave struck. His sword gleamed in the sunlight. He shouted to the soldiers, giving commands, inspiring courage. The battle began. Orcs climbed the walls. Soldiers pushed them back with sword and shield. Arrows flew from towers. Gimli swung his axe, cutting through enemy after enemy. Legolas jumped from wall to wall, firing arrow after arrow. Each strike was precise, each strike deadly. But the orcs were endless. They came like waves crashing on rocks. The defenders fought bravely, but exhaustion grew. At night, the battle slowed. Torches burned on the walls. Orcs howled in the dark. Soldiers tended to wounds. Fear whispered in every corner. But hope remained. Theoden rode among his men. "Stand firm," he shouted. "Hold your ground." His voice carried like thunder. Aragorn moved to the front gates, standing against the ladder of orcs climbing with iron claws. He fought with strength and skill, pushing them off one by one. Blood stained the stones. Sweat ran down his face. Meanwhile, Gimli found himself surrounded. He swung his axe in wide arcs, cutting through the crowd. His arms ached, but he did not stop. Every swing was a promise to survive, a promise to Rohan. Legolas leapt to a higher tower. Arrows rained down, each finding its mark. He smiled faintly, feeling the rush of battle. But even he knew they could not hold forever. Deep inside Helm's Deep, the enemy brought forth their siege towers. Huge wooden machines rolled forward, carrying orcs high above the walls. The defenders were outnumbered. Panic started to spread. But then, from the sky, a sound like thunder came. Horses, riders. Gandalf appeared on the ridge, riding Shadowfax, the white horse. Behind him, Rohirrim poured down the mountainside like a silver river. The riders charged, spears lowered, swords raised. The enemy's lines broke under the weight of the sudden assault. Orcs fell in every direction. Some ran, some fought desperately, but there was no escape. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli joined the charge. The defenders' spirits soared. Helm's Deep had not fallen, not yet. As dawn broke, the valley was filled with the sounds of battle fading. Smoke rose, and the wind carried the cries of both victory and loss. Soldiers tended to the wounded. Those who had survived looked toward the mountains, knowing this battle was just one of many. But in the hearts of the defenders, courage had grown. They had faced impossible odds and survived. And far away, in Isengard, the Ents continued their own march. The war was spreading, and no corner of Middle-earth would remain untouched. Far to the west, the valley of Isengard lay quiet. But for the Ents, it was the hour of action. Treebeard led them slowly at first, each step making the ground tremble. The Ents were massive, older than the mountains, and filled with a quiet, terrible strength. Merry and Pippin ran beside Treebeard, their small feet barely keeping up. Their eyes were wide as they saw the enormous figures around them. Every Ent was different, some with bark like stone, others like twisted roots, faces hidden in knots of wood, eyes glowing softly. "The land cries," Treebeard said. His voice was deep and slow. "It is time to answer." The Ents reached the outer walls of Isengard. The pit was wide, filled with water and smoke. Orcs were busy at work, but they did not see the approaching danger. Machines clanked, towers rolled forward, fires burned. Treebeard lifted one massive hand and pointed. "Break the machines," he said. The Ents moved like a single, unstoppable force. They tore wooden towers from the ground. They uprooted trees and hurled them at walls. Roots smashed gates. Stone cracked under their hands. Water from the flooded river swept through the pits, extinguishing fires and drowning orcs. Merry and Pippin clung to Treebeard's leg, amazed and terrified. "Look at them," Pippin whispered. "They're giant trees." "They are more than trees. They are the forest's warriors." The battle was terrifying. Orcs screamed. Machines collapsed. Fire hissed as it met the rising flood. Smoke mixed with splintered wood and mud. Treebeard moved toward Orthanc, the Tower of Saruman. His steps were slow but deliberate. Each one shook the ground. He raised a massive boulder and threw it against the walls. A deep crack appeared. Inside Orthanc, Saruman watched, powerless. His armies were defeated, his fires quenched, machines destroyed. Treebeard raised his voice in a deep, powerful roar. "Your greed ends here," he cried. The Ents answered in unison, their voices echoing through the valley. Stones rolled, trees crashed, the river surged higher, flooding the pits. Orcs were thrown into the water. Some ran, some fell. None could resist. Merry and Pippin ran along the paths cleared by the Ents, seeing the destruction all around. The air was heavy with the smell of wet wood and mud. Sparks flew as broken machines caught fire, then were doused by the flood. Treebeard paused for a moment, his massive eyes fixed on Orthanc. "Now, little ones, you will see the work of the forest." With a sudden, terrifying power, the Ents pushed through the gates and outer walls. The land itself seemed alive. rising against the fortress. Towers splintered. Orcs ran screaming into the water. Flames died. Smoke lifted. Silence began to fall. Merry and Pippin stood together, watching. Their hearts were full of awe. They had seen power older than men, older than kings, power that could change the world. Finally, Treebeard lowered his hands. The Ents stopped moving. The destruction was complete. The valley of Isengard lay in ruins. The pit was filled with water. The machines were gone. Only Orthanc stood, a lonely tower standing amidst chaos. Merry and Pippin looked at each other. "We survived," Pippin whispered. "Yes," said Merry, "and we saw the forest fight back." Treebeard bent down slightly. "Now, little ones, you are safe for a time." The hobbits nodded, still wide-eyed. They had witnessed the fury of nature, ancient and unstoppable, and somewhere deep inside, they felt hope growing. The war was far from over, but for now, the forest had spoken. The land was dark and quiet. Frodo and Sam walked slowly through the rocky path of Emyn Muil. Every step was painful. The stones cut their feet, and the heat of the sun burned their backs. They carried heavy packs filled with food, water, and weapons. Most importantly, Frodo carried the ring, the small, cold, heavy thing that weighed on his heart far more than his hands. Sam looked at him. "Frodo," he said softly, "we've walked so far. Are we close?" Frodo shook his head. His eyes were tired and his face pale. "I don't know, Sam," he whispered. "The path is dangerous, and Gollum knows it well." They had been following the strange, thin creature for days. Gollum had promised to lead them safely, but his sly smile and quiet whispers made them uneasy. Sometimes he crawled on all fours. Sometimes he walked behind them, muttering to himself. "Precious, yes, follow the little hobbits," he hissed quietly when he thought no one was listening. Sam kept his hand on his sword, wary. He didn't trust Gollum. As night fell, the sky turned red and purple. Shadows stretched across the rocks. Frodo and Sam set up a small camp in a narrow valley. Frodo removed the ring from his pocket and held it carefully. "It calls to me," he whispered. "Even here, far from the Black Land, I can feel it, Sam. Always." Sam knelt beside him. "You mustn't listen to it," he said softly. "We're almost there. Mount Doom is still far, but every step counts." Suddenly, Gollum emerged from behind a rock. His eyes were wide, gleaming in the moonlight. "Precious hobbits," he said softly. "We must go. We must move." Frodo sighed. "We need to rest tonight," he said firmly. "We cannot go any farther." Gollum's lips curled into a thin smile. "Yes, yes, rest. But tomorrow we move." The hobbits fell asleep, but their rest was uneasy. Shadows moved around them. Strange noises echoed from the rocks. Sam woke several times, holding his sword tightly. When dawn arrived, the sky was gray. Rain threatened. The wind blew through the narrow valley, cold and sharp. Frodo stood and looked ahead. The rocky cliffs rose higher, twisting like walls around them. The path was steep, dangerous. One misstep and they could fall. Gollum crawled ahead, pointing out small cracks and narrow ledges. This way," he whispered, his voice like silk and venom. Sam followed, keeping close to Frodo. Every moment he worried about the ring, about Gollum, about what might happen if they were seen by enemies, or if Frodo gave in to the ring's whispers. Hours passed. The climb was exhausting. Frodo's legs ached. Sam's back burned. Clouds darkened the sky. Rain began to fall. cold and wet. Suddenly, a large shadow moved over them. A black rider? No, too far. But fear struck them both. Sam held Frodo tightly. "Stay close," he shouted. Gollum laughed softly, almost like a whisper of wind. "Not far, not far, almost there." The valley opened into a narrow gorge. Water rushed through it, small waterfalls tumbling over rocks. Frodo and Sam carefully crossed, their feet slipping in the wet stones. Frodo stumbled. Sam grabbed him. "Easy, easy," he said. We're okay." Gollum hissed impatiently. "Move, move! Precious must go, must climb!" Frodo looked at him. There was something both cunning and desperate in his eyes. "Do you promise to lead us safely?" Frodo asked quietly. Gollum nodded. Yes, safely. Precious safe." But Sam remained suspicious. "I don't trust him," Sam whispered to Frodo. "Not a bit." Frodo only nodded. They continued their climb, step by step, careful and slow. Each rock, each shadow, each sound was a danger. Above them, dark clouds gathered. Lightning flashed, illuminating the steep cliffs. The wind howled. Frodo's heart pounded. The ring seemed heavier than ever, its pull stronger, its whispers louder. But Sam never left his side. "Don't listen," Sam said softly. "I'm here. We'll do this together." Frodo squeezed Sam's hand. For a moment, the terror of the path, the burden of the ring, and the cunning of Gollum all seemed less important. They were together, they had each other, and that small hope was enough to keep them moving forward. The land slowly changed as they moved forward. The rocks became darker. The air felt heavier. Every breath was harder than the last. Frodo felt a strange pressure on his chest, as if something unseen was watching him. Gollum moved ahead quietly, almost blending into the shadows. Sometimes he stopped and listened, pressing his ear to the ground. Other times he climbed high rocks and looked far ahead. "Black land is close," he whispered. "Very close." Sam did not like the sound of that. They reached the narrow path that led downward into a wide open area. The ground was dry and cracked. No grass grew there. No birds flew above. Frodo stopped. "This place feels wrong," he said softly. "Yes," Sam replied, "like the world is holding its breath." Gollum smiled, a thin and crooked smile. Soon the precious will be home," he whispered. That night they hid among sharp rocks. The sky was dark, covered with thick clouds. Far away, a red glow lit the horizon. Mount Doom. Frodo stared at it for a long time. He could feel the ring pulling him, calling to him like a quiet voice inside his mind. Put it on, just for a moment. His hand moved slowly toward his pocket. "Frodo!" Sam said quickly. Frodo stopped. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "It just happens." Sam sat beside him. "You're stronger than it," he said. "You've always been." Frodo nodded, but he was not sure. While the hobbits rested, Gollum sat alone a short distance away. He whispered to himself, rocking back and forth. "Smeagol promised," one voice said. "But precious is ours," another voice answered. His face twisted. His hands shook. "They hurts us," he hissed softly. "The fat one hates us." He looked back at Sam with angry eyes. The next morning they moved again. The path was narrow and dangerous. On one side, steep cliffs dropped into darkness. On the other, sharp rocks cut into their hands. Suddenly, Gollum stopped. "Hobbits must hide," he whispered urgently. Before Frodo could ask why, a terrible sound filled the air. Wings. A dark shadow passed over them. The ground seemed to grow colder. Frodo froze. A great flying creature circled above, ridden by a dark figure. Its scream pierced the air, sharp and cruel. The Nazgul. "Down!" whispered Sam, pulling Frodo to the ground. They pressed themselves against the rocks, barely breathing. Frodo's heart pounded wildly. The ring burned against his skin. The Nazgul screamed again, then flew away toward the Black Land. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, Sam exhaled. "That was too close," he said. Gollum smiled nervously. Yes, very close," he whispered. They continued on, moving only at night now, hiding during the day. Gollum led them through secret paths, avoiding open land. But Sam noticed something. Gollum was changing. He was kinder to Frodo, speaking softly to him, calling him Master. But when Frodo wasn't looking, Gollum's eyes burned with hate as he stared at Sam. One evening, as Frodo slept, Sam overheard Gollum whispering. "She trusts us," Gollum said quietly. "But we must take it," the other voice answered. "Not yet. First we trick them." Sam's blood ran cold. The next day, Gollum led them toward a tall, dark mountain. The path twisted upward like a snake. "There is another way," Gollum said. "A secret way, safe way." Sam looked up at the mountain. "I don't like this," he said. Frodo hesitated, then nodded. "We have no choice," he said. "We must trust him." Gollum smiled. "Oh yes, trust Smeagol." But far above them, unseen in the shadows, something moved. Something ancient, something hungry. And as they climbed higher, Sam felt it deep in his bones. They were being led into terrible danger. The path grew darker with every step. The air was cold and wet. The walls around Frodo and Sam rose high, blocking the sky. The light slowly disappeared until only shadows remained. "This way," Gollum whispered. "Up, up, very close now." Sam did not answer. His hand was tight around his sword. Every sound made his heart jump. Water dripped from the rocks. Something moved in the darkness, but he could not see what. Frodo walked ahead, slower now. The ring felt heavier than ever. His head hurt. His thoughts felt thick and confused. The path led them into a narrow opening. A tunnel. The air inside was old. It smelled of dust and decay. Thick webs covered the walls, sticky and pale. Sam stopped. "I don't like this place," he said quietly. Gollum smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "This is the way," he whispered. "Trust Smeagol." They stepped inside. Darkness swallowed them. The tunnel twisted and climbed. The webs grew thicker, brushing against their faces and hands. Frodo tried to ignore them, but his skin crawled with fear. Then they heard it. A soft sound. A slow movement. Something was breathing. Frodo froze. "Sam," he whispered. Before Sam could answer, two great eyes opened in the darkness. They glowed faintly, cold and hungry. Shelob. Her body was huge, black and swollen. Her legs moved silently across the stone. Her mouth opened, dripping with poison. Sam cried out. Shelob attacked. She struck fast, her body crashing into Frodo. He fell hard to the ground. The ring slipped from his hand, rolling across the stone. Frodo screamed. Shelob's stinger rose high and struck. Frodo went still. Sam rushed forward, shouting Frodo's name. He slashed at Shelob with his sword. The blade cut deep. Shelob screamed, a terrible sound that filled the tunnel. She turned on Sam, fury burning in her eyes. Sam stood his ground, shaking but brave. "For Frodo," he cried. He raised a sword and struck again. Shelob screamed once more and fled, disappearing into the darkness, wounded and enraged. Silence returned. Sam dropped to his knees beside Frodo. "Frodo?" he whispered. "Please, wake up." Frodo did not move. Sam's heart broke. Tears ran down his face. "I failed you," he said softly. He picked up the ring. It felt heavy and terrible in his hand. "I'll finish it," Sam said. "I'll carry it for you." But then, voices. Orcs. Sam hit quickly as orcs entered the tunnel. They laughed cruelly when they saw Frodo's body. "He's alive," one said. "Paralyzed." They lifted Frodo and carried him away. Sam watched, frozen in fear and pain. "No," he whispered. He waited until the orcs were gone, then followed, silent and determined. Outside, the land of Mordor stretched before him. Dark, broken, and filled with fire. Sam stood alone at the edge of the world. But he was not turning back. "I'm coming, Mr. Frodo," he said quietly. And with that, he stepped into the darkness.